All right, we're back with something a little bit different this time. As you can see, we have a 69 Mustang, what I sometimes call the Rustang for obvious reasons. Because, well, body's a little, well, it's quite rusty in spots. But anyway, the biggest showcase is not necessarily the car, but what we plan on doing with this thing at this moment. Just a quick little rundown on this thing. This is obviously a 69 fastback. Was originally a Mach 1 variant that originally had a 351 in it, but long story short, the 351 came out and while in storage rusted all to hell. Didn't have the money to get the thing fixed, so we ended up going with that right there, a 200 straight 6, which I'm sure some people would face palm on that, but this little engine actually got the job done for a while. Drove this car for probably a good 10 years as a near daily driver, making 70-mile round trips from here to my job, as well as into points beyond to go shopping and whatnot, whatever. But at first it had a C4 automatic that I had put a reverse manual valve body on there. Then I had converted it to a 3-speed manual. Then, with some adapter hardware, I took a little low-level T5 that was on a 4-cylinder Fox body Mustang and put that on the back of this 200 straight 6 and rolled with that, overdrive gear and all, and continued to roll with it for probably a good couple years or so. Probably more than a couple years. But it's, like I say, it's an old Mach 1 car, but currently has a 6-cylinder in it, and it's not horrifying inside. I mean, it's worn, but still there. But anyway, what are we going to do with this thing, you ask? Well, if you hadn't already caught a glimpse of it, we're going to try a project involving that thing right there. That's a lawnmower carb. If I'm not mistaken, I think this carb works on a 16 horsepower engine for like a lawn tractor or something. Now, I am not the first one to try this idea. I'm not even going to take credit for being the first one to try this idea. There's a couple other people that have already tried it successfully on YouTube. Probably might have seen them. One fella, Thunderhead 289, he's the I would say he's the OG on this little project, because he tried the idea on a 302 Ford with rather successful results. So if that worked on a 302 V8, I'm sure this little anemic 6-cylinder should be more than able to handle that carburetor. Another fella, channel is Robot Cantina, he tried it on a little 4-cylinder Saturn with pretty good results just as well. So, like I say, I'm optimistic. This idea should work pretty good. The only thing is, I'm going the poor man's route because I don't have the equipment to 3D print manifolds and the like. So, what do? Let's look at this bootleg shit right here. Took some metal tube right here. Cut out I also took some sheet metal, some rigid sheet metal, and I made little flanges to fit on the intake, as well as the face of the carburetor right there. And I did some rather shitty welding right here. You know, it got a lot of popcorn going on there, but I made sure that it was pretty sealed up. Worst case scenario, if we have to, I'll throw some JB Weld epoxy on there to help seal it better. Then I did another thing with a soup can for an air cleaner. What will I use in here? Probably just roll up some crap, the stuff in there, and let that serve as our air filter element. But that's that part. Then the last component is a fuel pressure regulator, because what I'm going to end up doing is tapping off of the output line on our mechanical fuel pump and running that into here. Now, I don't know what the pressure is exactly on that fuel pump, but I would like to imagine that the pressure might be a little more than what this little carburetor requires. So that thing is going to be our little savior to keep this thing from puking up all over itself and possibly starting a big ass fire. So Got our fuel pressure regulator. This thing can actually go all the way down to 1 psi with a maximum of 5 psi. So I zip tied that on here. I have all the fittings. It's pretty much ready to rock and roll. So all I got to do is just get a little gasket, which I'll probably cut from some cork material that I have, glue that thing down, remove our carburetor, glue this crap down, run some extra hose over to it, and see if this piece of shit actually works. I also have to hook up the throttle. That'll be a whole nother thing, but you know, whatever. First thing is start this thing up just for old time's sake, one more time. So I'll go ahead and put that back in here, start this thing up again. It hasn't really been on the road in probably a good year or so because, well, car has no AC and the heat is abysmal. So yeah, wintertime it gets cold as shit. Summertime, it gets hot as shit. So this thing hasn't really seen the road, but I do periodically start it up just to keep the engine loose, as well as to move the car around. So I just go ahead and start this thing up, let it run a while, and after that, shut her down. I'm trying to beat the rain. It's starting to drizzle quite a bit. Thought I'd get some recording in on this before it starts dumping on me. So let me start this thing up. Stop babbling. Yeah. See how long it takes to draw fuel back up from the tank. I did it pretty quick that time. As you can see, because I never really got around to repairing the ignition switch in the beginning, I just rigged up a push button for the actual starter. Yeah, it worked so well I just never bothered to really repair the damn thing. Got our headlight switch right here, which is nothing more than a generic toggle switch. This little switch right here is actually to kill the ignition system. So if I wanted to run the radio, I could throw that switch and it'll kill all the other equipment on here minus the radio, since of course the ignition switch was pooched. But our little 6-cylinder runs. Gotta loosen up the old bones a little bit. Wait for the choke to open just as well. Yeah, this 6-cylinder has a Duraspark ignition system on there. It originally had a points ignition system on there, but I didn't want to mess with that, so I went ahead and snatched this out of a car at the junkyard and hooked it all up and rock and roll. Wiring ain't the best. I mean, it's rather shitty, because this wiring here is actually the wiring that I had in this car 20 years ago when it was still a 351. So I never got around to actually rewiring everything in a nice, neat, and concise manner. Hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? And yeah, this car is past the 20-year mark in my hands. Got it in like 2000. So when I got it in 2000, it was actually in way worse shape than this is. Like, every panel was rusted all to hell. The panels that are on here now are still kind of rusty, but that was only because of age. Most of this stuff was actually new that I put on here. The door shells were actually new door shells. The hood is actually a new addition. And these fenders were actually used, fair condition fenders that, you know, they worked, but now they're getting little holes and crap. Bumpers are new. Well, new-ish. Well, new for about 10 years ago. The grill used to be new, but it's falling apart a little bit, so it needs to be replaced. Well, we do have a nice little aluminum rad here, though. And even though there's no fan shroud on here, this thing stays rather cold. Even if it's 100 degrees outside, this thing will only run at about maybe 170, 180, courtesy of the 160 thermostat. But yep, 206 cylinder with a little bitty 1-barrel carburetor and a 5-speed manual. But as we can see, this thing does run. It runs rather well for all intents and purposes. So with all that said and done, I'll let this thing warm up some, just because I hadn't started it in probably about a month, give or take. So it's starting to rain. I'm gonna start cleaning up a little bit, shut this thing down, and I will pick this up again probably tomorrow, because we're not going to work in the rain doing this shit. So again, as usual, stand by. Well, got our old carb off, no big deal, simple thing, 2 bolts. Also took a minute to cut a gasket out of some gasket paper for our base right here. This thing doesn't exactly look the best, but I mean, it is what it is. It might not be perfectly level, but to solve that, we're just going to compensate with a bunch of gasket maker. So with that all said and done, I'm going to get it mounted. On a lighter note, because our base is not exactly a 1/2-inch thick base from a carburetor, I'm going to have to use some spacers here in the form of large nuts, washers, whatever, to help be able to compensate for this extra tread and everything, so we can actually get all this garbage seated. We'll see if we need that or not. I don't know, but let's get this crap on. Okay, we run into, well, I would say problem number 1, but it consists of multiple little problems. One is because, well, the way the thing is made, thanks to me, it's either one of 2 ways it could go on. It could go on with the carb facing that way to the front, or that way to the back. If I do it to the back, our little air cleaner setup is going to be about a couple inches shy of the firewall. Now, on one end, that could be acceptable, but then that means anytime we need to change our little air filter element, whenever I do put it in there, it's going to require pulling this entire thing off and redoing the gasket and all that, and that would be a pain in the ass. This way, I at least have some remote chance of reaching it through this little open area under this support bar right here. Mind you, this is all temporary still, so yeah, whatever. Next little problem is our fuel line and filter. Obviously, our fuel filter and the line come up right here to where it would have terminated at the carburetor, the stock carburetor. But because of the way this thing is shooting out to the front a little excessively, I'm gonna have to take our fuel line off, or at least carefully manipulate it where I'm not permanently altering it or anything, to allow me to be able to stretch this around, or I'm just gonna have to kind of do some other creative crap. More than likely, I'm gonna be cutting these straps off and relocating our little regulator. So I'm gonna have to go ahead and figure out something. We're, again, my favorite term, shooting from the hip, because this is definitely a case of that. And the last problem we have is our throttle cable, because, well, carburetor sits right here where the throttle is at. Throttle's way up here. So yeah, how are we gonna manage that right there? Because right there is open throttle, that's closed throttle. Now I might be able to do something like attach our cable. I have to take it off of there, and then probably end up doing some Mickey Mouse bullshit. But I would have to more than likely drill a little hole or something here to put some type of attachment point. Or, yeah, it's not even gonna work like that, because, well, that's situated in a shitty manner like that. Crazy thing about this is, I wonder if I do need to go ahead and turn it around the other way, because that would actually put our throttle in line with this, and then as far as our regulator, I just have to turn it around that way, and I should be able to reach that. Now, yeah, might just end up doing that shit. Stand by. Okay, on this setup, as we could see, like I said, our little air cleaner thing is probably about 4 inches from the firewall. Not horrifying, but not desirable. But I guess if I was going to change it out, I could just simply, I might be able to actually pull the shit out from there. Who knows, but easier way would be to just pull the carburetor off right there. But as for our fuel line setup, I could just turn our regulator around that way and be more easily able to reach our fuel filter right here, even with a longer length of hose right here. Put that right there, probably zip tie it or something. Put a little longer length of hose right there, and I could reach our regulator right there. Now, our throttle. In that configuration, that's open, that's closed throttle. Now, our cable is still kind of off, but we're kind of in a better position to disconnect it from right there and put it in a position that would have it more straight across. Now this might be achieved with a little piece of metal or something that I might have to attach right here, bolt it up, and then that'll move our cable to right about here where it's got a straight shot to our little lug right here. And that little lug, if I do anything, I could snap this off real quick. Here we go. We've got a little thing right here that coincides with the same little thing right there. Matter of fact, I could actually take that little broken piece off and swap it with that one. But yeah, so our next move is going to be our fuel filter and regulator setup. We're going to go ahead and correct that little setup, then do our throttle. So again, stand by. Go ahead and put this together. Put a smaller nipple on there as well. Go ahead and tighten this down. Go ahead and zip tie all of this. Okay. Squeeze that. Oop. Okay, what I came up with was a piece of scrap angle iron. Drilled some holes in it. These holes here are going to be for our stock bracket where the cable was originally attached. If this damn thing would focus. Hold on. Okay, there we go. This other hole here by my thumb will be where the cable is actually attached. Now, because of some other minute angles, I'm going to end up having to use a spacer, well, a large nut, to go between the angle iron and the little mounting thing on the cable, so I don't have any excessive bends. But we'll put the thing together and you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. So let's go ahead and put the garbage together. Okay, what we're working with here. Got our stock bracket, got our angle iron right here, attached with a bolt, nut and bolt to one hole here. Had to have the angle iron at an angle, so I used that second hole as kind of a retaining or an anchor point, like not really going through this groove right here, otherwise the angle iron would have been too low. But I did this right here to kind of just keep this angle iron from being able to do this number. So that side is anchored. As for our cable, like I said, I used a longer bolt with a nut between the little mounting piece and the angle iron, so everything is kind of not stretched, I guess is a good way to put it. But we look at it, it's allowed to function like it needs to. Now, if I wanted to, I could probably put a zip tie on this cable just to keep it from flopping around, but it's probably not critical. So at this point, we should really, well, minus our choke cable, of course, we should be able to actually try to see if this thing will actually do something. Well, let's go. Let's try. On a side note, we have our choke lever right here. Now, what I'm going to end up having to do, obviously, is route a temporary choke cable to inside the cab area for this thing, so I don't have to come out here and manually operate the choke when the thing is running. But yeah, but for right now, we're just gonna go ahead and see if this piece of shit's actually gonna do something. So again, let's go. I'm gonna go ahead and tweak this regulator up a little bit too, because I think it's on 1. I might put it on 2, maybe 3. See where I'll put it right in the middle, because it goes up to 5. So I'll put it on 3 and see how it acts and tweak things as we need to. So let's go. All right, to make things a little bit easier, I used the little remote starter button so we can actually crank the thing outside here while playing with the carburetor. But yeah, go ahead and see what this thing does. As you can see, it runs. And it's flooding a little bit, so we're going to tweak it down. small leak where it was flooding at the carburetor. It was dripping out of the air cleaner pan, but it seems to have balanced itself now where it's not doing it anymore. Let that gas evaporate because we don't need gas on anything. Now it's a matter of trying to get it to where it's going to act right when the choke is wide open. A good conclusion that I can come up with right now as to why it doesn't want to exactly act right at wide open throttle is because it's not getting enough gas even in that little narrow opening. We're going to do a little more tweaking. Pretty smooth throttle. Well, preliminary test obviously shows proof of concept. This engine will indeed run on a lawnmower carburetor. And with the right adjustments on the choke and everything, which choke has to be almost half closed, seems to be a sweet spot for it so far. I know there's more we could do adjustment-wise to tweak it. I'm probably going to end up at some point putting an air fuel meter on this thing as I continue to play with this whole idea. This is definitely not the end of it. But, yeah, we're going to go ahead. I'm going to dig a little more into the intricacies of our lawnmower carburetor to see if I could do any more tweaking. But at the same time, we're going to do a quick preliminary under load test, which is really nothing more than me trying to back this thing up. So, see how that plays out. Well, it looked like it was taking the throttle, but I will explain what that main problem is right now. That is the lack of vacuum advance on our distributor. That's going to be another little thing that we have to address, is the vacuum advance. It will take the throttle, but any abrupt changes are going to give us the results you've seen. I could slowly throttle up, it'll take it, but as soon as I let off the throttle, it's going to quit. Or if I try to give it too much throttle too fast, it's going to quit. So that'll be another little thing I'll have to address. That might involve me tapping a hole for a little nipple or something for our vacuum advance tube on the distributor. But again, we're playing around with this shit. Other people have tried it. Like I mentioned, a couple other guys did it. I'm doing it now because I actually like the idea. It seems pretty damn cool. So, yeah, right now, it's running. You've seen it start right back up after it stalled out. We're going to keep playing with this shit. That'll be part 2. I've done enough talking. So, stay tuned. Hit the like and subscribe, all that good shit. Stay tuned for part 2 of this little experiment. And we're going to dig a little deeper into this thing because I'm impressed. Very impressed. So, we'll do some more tweaking later. Maybe make this thing be a very viable setup and do some road testing. So until the next time, as usual, already told you, do it. I'm out.